Sure. Just want to thank everybody in attendance and those that will be watching this on demand. But we've got a great session today on Suncor's Advanced Work Packaging Program. And this is, I believe, the 14th in the series presented by the Community of Practice. So before we get started, I'm just going to give you a little background on the Community of Practice, and then I'll hand it over to Dylan. First, let's take a look at the next slide. So our vision for the Community of Practice has been updated, but basically we're looking at construction that's safer, more effective, and more efficient. And we've moved that around a little bit, but I think that's our vision of the world if the Community of Practice is successful, and I believe we will be. So next, let's look at our mission. Next slide, thank you. So we're really all about creating a community that's going to share knowledge, encourage discussion, promote adoption of advanced work packaging, and other initiatives. So that includes Lean, BIM, Scrum, Agile, all of the things that are necessary to improve our project performance. We're receptive to that information being in the Community of Practice. Next slide. We have a virtual summit that's coming up. It's scheduled for August 25th and 6th. Now, this virtual summit is actually a COA event. They have 5 research teams that are going to be reporting out, and we're going to have senior members from the CII community adding context and talking about where we're taking this. Normally, these report outs would be happening at the CII annual conference, but that's been canceled this year. And normally, the only people that would typically be able to attend that conference are CII members. But Group ASI has been asked to organize this summit for CII, and they've made 2 critical changes. The first change is that they're opening it up to members of the non-CII community, and I think that's a great improvement. And then the second is that they've offered members of the COP group that are not CII members a discounted rate for the event. So we're looking at 5 report outs and 2 hours of commentary over 2 days, and they're pricing that at $175 for their members, $200 for members of the COP, and then $225 for the general public. This session will be eligible for PDHs and PDUs. So if you're a PMP like myself, this is a great way to get some of those credits you need for recertification purposes. And we'll be putting up more information in the future, but if you want to go to our website, awpconference.com/CII summit with a dash in the middle, you can get more information there. Our full conference website will be up in 2 weeks, or 1 week, I guess. It'll be Monday of the week following. But if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer that. Oh, and correction here to me, I called it a COA event. I misspoke. It's actually a CII event, just like it says in big letters at the top there. Next slide. We also have conferences going on in London in October and Houston in late October. Both of those events are going to be both physical and virtual. So you'll be able to attend either of those events from anywhere in the world. And we'll be coming out with some information on that probably in the coming weeks. Now, not to delay things any further, I'm going to hand it over to Dylan and have him do this presentation. Dylan,
Thanks,
take it away.
thanks, Lloyd. And thanks to everybody for taking the time to be with us today. As Lloyd said, my name's Dylan Riley. I work for Suncor Energy in our Project Resources Group, and I'm principally, in charge of our advanced planning and operational discipline initiative, which includes advanced work packaging. Been at this for about a little bit less than 3 years now, but I do have quite a long background with projects at Suncor. I actually issued my first EWP in 2001, and wouldn't you know it, the process and the tools that we use is almost been unchanged in that time. I've worked on both sides of the fence. I've worked as a contract engineer. I've worked for one of our major construction contractors in major projects, and I've also been on and off both a construction and project manager for Suncor directly over the last few years. But these days, I've been looking after our advanced work packaging initiative, and really looking to evolve and better how we implement that. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Just a quick safety moment. Suncor, as well as I'm sure everybody on the call here, we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic response, and we have been for the last 3 months. We are now just starting our return to work program. And in fact, that's where I am today. I'm in our downtown office here in Calgary. But we do have a number of protocols that we have implemented over the last few months, designed to keep our workforce safe. And so, all of our workforce, we complete daily self-assessments of our COVID-19 fitness for duty. We have temperature screening at all of our facilities. We have mandatory PPE, masks and gloves, and we've implemented physical barriers wherever we cannot maintain our physical distancing. And we have signage and access restrictions and occupancy restrictions on all of our facilities. And so, all of our elevators are reduced occupancy, and most of our office facilities are also at a reduced occupancy as well. And it's really just around keeping our workforce safe. And so we're taking a phased approach to our return to work, and we'll gradually ramp that up as we monitor the situation. Okay, let's talk AWP. I've basically structured today's talk basically around the lessons learned over the last 2.5 years of implementing an AWP Center of Excellence within Suncor. When we got started, we all as Suncor project members, but Suncor as a whole, we have a deep history with advanced work packaging, workface planning, but we really weren't seeing a lot of the benefits from it. And so, how we got started is we really looked at all of our tools and methods. We leaned on COA, CII, and a lot of the membership. And we really look to incorporate a lot of the best practices that can be found across industry. And so, the first thing that I'd like to say is to just really, if you do not have a corporate playbook around AWP implementation, there's lots of good information around best practices available. Incorporate that into your own existing project management standards and procedures, and provide training and competency to your staff on how to do it well. And that's really how we did it. We took a three-pronged approach for our Center of Excellence. We have a set of procedures we call the toolkit, which is comprised of a standard, a guideline and some templates on how to standardize the implementation. We have training available for both Suncor and non-Suncor team members to increase their own competency. And then we also provide assessments to in-flight or projects that are getting started to give them some feedback on some areas of improvement. Just changing. So the next thing I would say around AWP, and this is certainly the case at Suncor, don't assume that you're already doing it. When we got started on this here at Suncor, we basically ran into two people pretty regularly when we engaged with projects. The one group of people, were the ones that already knew everything about AWP and they were already doing it. And then there was another group of people that felt like they had never seen AWP and they knew nothing about it. And point of fact, neither of those is correct. Suncor's both been doing AWP for a long time, and they haven't. The thing I would say here is that even if different elements of your organization is doing AWP, they likely can do it better, and there's likely been an evolution with the practice within industry that all of us can learn from and adapt to our own execution methodologies. And so, if you're doing it the same way that you did it previously, then you're probably going to get exactly the same result. And industry research has shown that we're not leading the world in project execution here in Alberta, and I think there's lots of room for opportunity on doing it better. If any of you come from an organization that has a deep infrastructure around project management and strong cultures on how to do it, those actually are harder to change in that. There's been a lot of investment in training and documentation, and oftentimes to get those types of organizations to change can require a higher degree of commitment from your leadership. And don't assume that there's a one style of project that AWP fits better. We have implemented it both on small and large projects. And we've also taken an incremental approach to its implementation, in that, you do not have to, transform every aspect of project execution. You can just choose to do one or two things better than you normally would, and really take a long-term approach towards best practice. We feel that is the best way, and so we're in it for the long haul. We have quite a long roadmap towards best practice, and it's really just chipping away at the problem one problem at a time. One thing that you're going to need to do when you're standing up a new AWP program is you're going to need to measure it. In that there really isn't any way to guarantee its effectiveness unless you actually have objective ways of measuring it. So within our Center of Excellence here, we have two ways of doing that. We have a KPI library that we have implemented based on AWP. This is in addition to the non-AWP metrics that are in place at Suncor. And this is really to allow projects to self-measure their own performance in various aspects of AWP execution. We also have integrated AWP evaluation with our gate reviews, and so Suncor, like most owner organizations, have a stage gate process for project development execution. It's called Asset Development Execution Model. And we've integrated AWP assessment with those gate reviews, and that allows those gate reviewers an objective feedback on how a project is adhering to those best practices that are in place. And if you as an organization don't feel like you have necessarily the competency to evaluate, There are third-party evaluations available to any organization that wants to go look for them, and those can certainly supplement gate reviews within your organization, and can certainly provide good objective feedback to a project team on how they're doing. Another finding that we've had over the last 3 years of engaging projects is almost all of them have waited too late to start planning for AWP. Traditionally, it's been seen as a construction methodology, WorkFace Planning 2.0. I've once been told, and really that's not what AWP is. And so our current standard is to start planning for AWP implementation during early concept selection and design. And so the earlier your project team can start identifying what aspects of advanced work packaging they want to implement and how, usually there will be less change within your project. Certainly we are a big believer in constructability and early construction involvement. Its savings are proven within industry. And so, as early as possible within your project, if you can, get your constructor involved in the design and strategy development, then the more integrated your project will become. Similarly, once you've been able to come up with that path of construction within your project, use that to then guide the rest of your contracting and procurement strategies. And so, by starting AWP planning as early as possible, you can include those requirements within your contractual scopes of work, and even your purchase orders if required. And so, the owner really drives this integration. As for Suncor, almost none of our projects are true EPC projects. There's often a lot of integration required between our various players, and it's really important that that as an owner, that you drive that culture of integration to those various stakeholders. That there's no more over the fence and finger pointing. That you're able to build a true integrated team. Without that, your AWP just simply won't work. And lastly, as projects develop, certainly at Suncor, we very rarely start with the same strategies that we finish with. Over the stages, we can see change, but it's important that the plan itself, and specifically in this case, a path of construction. Once it's been issued and everybody has sort of stacked hands on it, resist the temptation to change that as the project matures. That's a really important aspect. And so, what we've been able to do at Suncor is to come up with a methodology of what level of AWP development by stage should be in place, and then we use that to inform the gate review process, so that they can have that objective view to whether or not their planning is adequate or not. And I coined this phrase, as some of you who may have worked with Suncor in the past. We have a journey to zero safety mindset, zero incidents. We're now coining the phrase a journey to zero RFIs. That if the planning can truly be that robust, then there shouldn't be a need for an RFI, and your integrated team can truly just execute without having to deal with constant change. Another key aspect of AWP implementation is to really treat it as the contributions from all project stakeholders. And so, when we got going with engaging projects, we didn't see, first of all, a good understanding, but even an integration of the various contributions of the functional stakeholders to the advanced work packaging implementation. It was seen as a construction deliverable, as I said. and there really wasn't a lot of buy-in from the different stakeholders. And so, one of the key culture changes that we've driven is to not treat it as the deliverable of any one particular function, but it's a deliverable of the integrated team. And so, we've been able to define a model of those different contributions within our toolkits. We include that in the project RASKIs and role descriptions and execution plans. And then we use some AWP deliverables to then drive that content structure to those functional deliverables. So, an estimate, the schedule, the procurement plan has defined AWP integration from the front end planning that then can really start to integrate the contributions of the various functions into the project. And AWP can be one of those methods that provides that integration. And lastly, I would say that this is really the first step to get to the data integration, is that AWP can really serve as that scaffolding that the different functional contributions in your digital project can start to hang together. And an on-digital project, don't assume anybody really understands it. We've been doing this for a number of years now. We're on our own digital transformation journey, as I think most organizations are right now. And there's just so much change happening within the industry, and it's happening so fast that it's very difficult to really understand what best practice is at this point. And so, most organizations will have an established paradigm and investment in infrastructure with how they deliver projects, but there's going to be change coming to most organizations. And so, that makes it a challenge to actually have standardization across a portfolio of projects, and even worse, actually having true competency, because nobody truly understands this. And so, one of the things AWP can really benefit an organization is it can take those planning best practices that have really been around for decades now, and it can be adopted to modern methods. And so, most of the big engineering technology providers now actually have AWP solutions in-house, and then organizations can lean on some of those vendors to really prop up their own execution. It doesn't do the planning for you. Planning still is outside of what technology will deliver, but the technology can certainly help to build some integration within the project. And the last thing I would say on this one is it's really imperative for industry to get onto this digital transformation before a lot of this planning wisdom starts to retire. Is that there are new methods. Digital projects are popping up more and more, but again, it doesn't replace good old-fashioned planning 101. And so, it's really a good time within the industry to pair up some of these digital project experts with some of our construction and project experts, and we can really start to evolve how we deliver projects. And I think this is one of the areas that AWP can really serve to bring those two best practices together. I did want to leave lots of time for a good discussion today, so that's the reason why I went a bit fast. But maybe I'll just summarize. Start out, have a center of excellence within your organization. There's no way for any company to actually understand or deliver the benefits from AWP unless they actually have a standard with which they want to deliver it. Go out and train your people. If you don't have the competency in-house, go out and find it. There's lots of help available within industry, COA, CII, lots of consultants. It's there if you're willing to look for it. start early. Don't wait until you have all the contracts in place and you have your construction contractor ready to mobilize to start thinking about AWP. If that's what you're doing, it's way too late. And really, integrate it across the spectrum of stakeholders that you have within your project. If you're doing AWP in isolation, or you're treating it as either an engineering or a construction deliverable, it just simply won't work. And last but not least, don't try and decouple your AWP delivery from your digital project. Figure out ways that the AWP structure and coding, that's the foundation, can be integrated with your data model, and then you can really start to evolve how you do it. And most companies like Suncor, we'll see a real diversity of projects. We have projects that are still delivering paper-based AWP packages, but we're also more and more now starting to see virtual work packages delivered inside an integrated data warehouse, like a 3D model. So exciting things are starting to blossom. And with that, I'd like to open the conversation up to Q&A.
Steve, would you please explain to people how we would like them to submit their questions?
For sure, yeah. So for those who are familiar with our webinar series and Zoom webinars, you can submit questions via the Q&A feature or through the chat. We definitely encourage you to send them via Q&A. So just look for the Q&A button in your attendee panel and go ahead and send us your questions, and that way our presenter can see your questions and speak to them directly. We do have a couple questions coming in already. Both through the chat and through the Q&A. Yeah, so can you see the, Dylan, can you see the questions? Yep. Did you want to maybe just...
Yeah, I'll take these as they come in, and hopefully I'll try and answer them as best as I can.
Sounds good.
So first one from Steve here. What do you have quantified as Suncor's biggest and smallest ROI outcome from adopting AWP? So our target return for our initiative is a 10% TIC reduction. That really equates to a 25% improvement in productivity, or roughly 1 hour of tool time a day. I mean, you could treat all of those things as basically saying the same thing. That's our target. We've set incremental targets along that pathway, and we're giving ourselves roughly 5 years to get there. And so, that's the journey that we're on. And we have seen some success in some projects, but one of the real challenges with AWP is how do you separate the sort of the productivity improvement, cost savings from AWP on its own, from sort of the other variables that are in place. And so, that was actually one of the reasons why we spent so much time on AWP KPIs and our AWP assessments at gate reviews. Is it allows us that transparency, so that we can identify the projects that are doing AWP well, that are seeing those productivity improvements, or if projects that are not doing AWP well but are still seeing productivity improvements, that to us says that it's due to something other than AWP. Hopefully that answered your question, Steve. Neil asked what software is Suncor using. The answer is a lot. I can't remember what our application inventory was. It was something like 47 separate applications within projects. One thing I would say is, regardless of what style of organization you're in, whether it's the owner or if you're on an EPC side, there will almost always be an integrated tool set in place at a project in Alberta. And so the challenge for most projects is to understand those responsibilities from a front-end planning. And so we have a process that we call a tool inventory that really tries to identify which which tool is provided by which organization for which function, if I can put it that way. And you know, at Suncor, the answer to that question is almost always different for each project. And so that's one of the challenges, is that there is not a top to bottom integrated tool set in any project at Suncor. Nick asked, has Suncor utilized the AWP model outside of brownfield construction? Has Suncor looked to apply this process to turnarounds? You know, what I would say to the turnarounds is we actually have a very good turnaround planning group at Suncor, and they don't actually call what they do AWP, but it sure looks a lot like AWP to me. And so we've worked with our small projects and turnarounds group to provide them some guidance from best practice, but our turnaround planning group is a standalone methodology that Suncor uses to plan and execute turnarounds. And for the AWP model outside of brownfield, I take that to mean greenfield. Yes, you know, all of our projects now have AWP requirements baked into the scopes of work for both brownfield and greenfield. So the answer to that one is definitely yes. Suncor developing a data model, relying on engineer and contractor to collaborate on requirements. The answer is yes to both. We are developing our own a data model. This is really just to understand our own backyard. But again, you know, all of our projects will eventually will always most likely have an integrated tool set. Some provided by Suncor, some provided by our EP houses, and some provided by our Cs. And so the real challenge for a project leader at Suncor is to really understand that, and then provide an integrated environment that information can be developed and not be disconnected. Kim, do you find contractors viewing AWP as a project controls tool and not a full EPC tool? Well, you know, I'd actually say the opposite, Kim. You know, I find our contractors don't really understand that AWP has an interface with project controls, and they really just treat it as a WorkFace Planning 2.0. And so one of the challenges that we've worked hard to overcome with our contractors is to understand that it's an integrated delivery, not just the responsibility of one particular function. But I would say, you know, my experience at least has been that most of our stakeholders treat it as a construction deliverable, first and foremost, with some interfaces with engineering. I would say that that's generally the impression I get. Go back to the slide. Don't wait for AWP. I'll do that right here. Yeah, I can explain these tables with a focus on feed stage 2. Yeah, so thanks for your question, Stephen. You know, what we've come up with for Suncor is to align our AWP development to our ADAM stage gate. Again, this is to try and sort of inform projects on a level of development by stages. And so, you know, real easy, your CWA boundaries would need to be in place by gate 2. For Suncor, that is called the concept selection and design. And your CWP boundaries would need to be set by the end of feed, stage gate 3 for Suncor. And then your EWP, and if you're using PWP boundaries would need to be set, you know, within the detailed design stage. And usually starting that prior to that, usually sometime in feed, you're doing early engineering boundary formation. And then, you know, as you start to get halfway through detailed design and prior to starting bulk construction, you know, you should start doing your IWP boundary formation. The key is to really just treat these things as hierarchical, is that one boundary supports the other. And so really having a good understanding of the relationship between CWA, CWP, EWP, and IWPs is important. So we use a process of rules to guide that, and so you cannot have, for instance, CWPs spanning CWAs or EWPs that span CWPs, for example. And this helps to keep that structure in place as the project starts to develop. The bottom table is really based on a process we call a content register, and this is really how we describe what level of content development needs to be in place by our stage gate. And what this is designed to do is to help to inform projects. First and foremost, what content do they plan on mapping to each package type that they plan on using, and then to further identify who's going to be responsible for that content and to what level, and then how are you going to measure it. And so there's a lot more detail around that bottom table, but this is really just the summary of what level of development needs to be placed. And the top table there is just really our we call it our strategy alignment to AWP, the different contract styles that you may implement at Suncor are across the top, and then where you would map what type of content to what package type is what's meant to be shown there. Hopefully that answered your question, Stephen. Raul Fast, can you say something about the Center of Excellence and the AWP Project Team? Yeah, I mean, Suncor has a group called Project Resources. Our mandate is to really maintain our project execution standards and procedures. So that's the group that I work for. And the sort of three aspects I would say to the AWP or the AP and OD is what we're calling it, team within Project Resources, is really to maintain that toolkit, the standard guidelines and templates, to engage and train and build competency within AWP, within our project teams, and third, to provide assessments and measurement techniques to our ADEM governance group, so that they can have a good objective third-party review of how the AWP is being implemented within a particular project. Luigi's asked, welcome Luigi from Italy, which is the range of project size where AWP had been implemented? So our standard answer to this right now is we're really engaging with our large cap projects. So that's 100 million and up from there. But we have definitely worked with our smaller projects group. We call that business unit projects at Suncor. And that is all the way down to, I think the smallest project that they issued a package on was actually $50,000. So there is definitely room to grow within our scalable AWP initiative. But for now, most of our effort is in our large cap projects, which is 100 million and up. What tools do you use to manage IWPs? We really do not. To be clear, once we get to developing and managing the IWPs, almost always that's the expectation of our construction contractors. From an AWP planning point of view, it's really around identifying those tools and how they integrate with the rest of the project information. I would say that's most of the challenge that we see is there's an interface between essentially three parties on most projects. One party is Suncor, or the owner, the other one is the EP, and then the third one is the construction contractor or construction contractors. And how do you share and integrate that information is the real challenge. And so really, taking the IWP as a container of information, conceptually, that's all it is. And really having some front-end planning on how you're going to get that information into there in a sustainable and quality way, I would say is the challenge there. But in general, we use whatever tool our contractor brings to the table. What we do from a scope of work point of view is try and ensure that our contractors have certain capabilities in place from the selection process. How does project controls interface with your AWP model? So a number of different ways. So we have, just like you see on the page here, different levels of development in place by stage. Project controls is a similar standard for both estimate and schedule development. So, as the AWP coding structure and boundary formation starts to develop, we ensure that those estimates and schedules are developed accordingly. And so, Gate 3, good rule of thumb at Suncor, Gate 3 is a level 3 schedule. That would require the CWP coding to be integrated with the project schedule. Similarly, the estimate takeoff would also need to be itemized by that construction work package coding, and that would be assessed at the gate review to ensure that it's in place. That's basically how we ensure that. For what kind of projects AWP has been implemented, LSTK, EPCM, EP turnaround. I would say, we have a few different models there. I would say most of our projects are EP plus C. So we have an interface between construction. We do have some larger greenfield projects that are in development that are planned to be EPC. Both of them have AWP content. And one thing I would say here is it really doesn't, at least in my opinion, there's no limitation around one particular strategy. As you can see here on the page, we really have guidance on all the different project strategies. What is important as an execution team is to understand how that strategy then affects AWP. And principally what I would say about this is the level of owner involvement. And so you align your AWP implementation with where your interfaces are. And so if you know that you have an interface between EP and C, which is often the case at Suncor, then Suncor needs to be at that table, and certainly Suncor needs to be driving the AWP adoption across those interfaces. Otherwise, you'll start to see disintegration, and you won't really gain the productivity effects down the road. And we've seen that time and time again in lessons learned. How have you been able to quantify the benefit of the AWP program? How do you measure the cost of AWP, advertised increase to engineering support? Yeah, this is a good one, Todd. One thing I'd say about AWP is it's a front-end investment in future cost reductions in construction. That's really what AWP is driving to achieve. Our targets are, again, a 25% increase in productivity, or roughly an hour of tool time a day. That's some of the quantifiable measurement techniques. But as I said earlier, it's difficult to isolate productivity improvements from AWP from just good overall project execution. So, we do have KPIs and KPI targets that are strictly based on AWP, not on any other types of man hours or costs. And we're baking those targets into our benchmarking to start to develop some of our own benchmarks. And then as far as what is the cost, this is an active area, I think, of research within both Suncor and industry. There's players out there that feel there should be no cost to doing AWP, and then there's other research that says that it's somewhere between a 0.6 and a 2% increase to the TIC. We don't have any actual hard numbers to stand behind as far as the cost. What I would say, though, Todd, is it does require your EP to work differently. And so, the earlier you're able to sort of set that culture around integration and the expectation of, basically aligning the path of engineering to the path of construction, the earlier that expectation can be set in your projects, the less the cost will be. And usually those costs show up in resequencing or repackaging either engineering or procurement down the road. And so that all I would say here is the earlier you start planning for it, the cheaper it's going to be. How does AWP link to progress measurement and earn value measurement? We have both a set of AWP and non-AWP earned value measurement techniques, a whole library of KPIs really that have been developed. We use those in parallel with the traditional methodologies, and so you will see earned value measurement in man hours at Suncor. You'll also see it in terms of packages, and so the one thing I'd say, and I don't think I said it earlier, was really the need to shift to leading indicators as opposed to lagging indicators. And so when I say leading indicators at Suncor, what that means is basically two things: readiness and constraint. So we've developed a set of KPIs, a family of KPIs for each of these, where we're attempting to start to provide early indicators of problem areas, and as an industry, I would say that we haven't done a good job focusing on readiness and measuring it, and as a factor of your productivity. And so we're good at measuring productivity and schedule delays or any of these things. These are all performance or change KPIs when you're talking about it. And so if you're talking about performance or PF factor or schedule delay factor, that means you're measuring something that's already happened, and so there's really no way for you to improve it. It's already happened. And so we're working actively with our project controls group to shift the conversation to leading indicators, so readiness and constraint, sharing that data back to the project that hopefully can enable them to take action prior to a triggering event happening. And so that's what I would say about this, and I would say as an industry, this is an active area of involvement or development right now. Christopher, what is Suncor's strategy for promoting and integrating AWP collaboration between the different stakeholders of a project? I would say here, Chris, it's really providing the first of all that competency and that center of excellence. So Suncor has invested both through COA, through CII, but also through our own project resources group, and we're in it for the long haul around believing in the value of high quality AWP. We're putting it into our scopes of work, and we're definitely holding an expectation both from our own teams, but also all of our partners that we work with, that we need to do it better. And I would say this, and I have said it in some of my engagement sessions with our own project teams. Alberta as a whole is experiencing what I call capital flight, and we're seen as a risk to investors to invest money, and that isn't just due to our performance in executing projects, but it certainly can't hurt to do it better. And so I'd say there's lots of reasons why all of us should be aligned and integrated on executing projects better. And I usually lead with that type of approach when engaging projects, is that there's opportunities for us all to do it better than we normally would. AWP is an aspect of that. It's a big aspect, but I think that there's there's room to grow there. And I haven't found a lot of resistance to that. Most of the resistance that I've met over the years has come down to the nuances of exactly how. So how to do it well, I think, is the more interesting conversation. But I don't think anybody doesn't agree that we need to do it better. How do you approach a project with a contractor that has no AWP experience, or do you have AWP as a knockout criterion or pre-qualification? I would say it's more often the second, that we have, we're in the habit these days of providing the AWP as both pre-qualification, but also within the scope of work, so that we can evaluate it as part of our commitment process. So I would say more often than not, we're working with companies that have already provided us with their capabilities as part of the selection. We do meet companies that clearly demonstrate that they've never done it before, but they're willing to learn. And so usually what we do in that case, should we work with them is we provide them with that expertise, and I think there's lots of opportunity there, and in fact, I think that there's often, it's easier to start from scratch with some aspects of AWP than in companies that have been doing it for years but just have been doing it either poorly or just simply wrong. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's a good opportunity to provide them with some development. Shiv, what is the difference between OS 2.0 and Industry 4.0? I don't really know. I would say Suncor, we call it our Suncor 4.0 journey. This is really around, it's a multi-pronged transformation that's going on at Suncor, but two aspects of it definitely are how to use technology and data to really drive efficiencies throughout both our operations but also our capital programs. And so I would say in an AWP conversation, this is really around understanding your own, first of all, your own organization's technology and data model, but then within a project, it's understanding that integrated technology and data model is the challenge for most projects that I interface with. And I would say that there's just not enough competency in industry in this space right now. I would say most of the competency is sitting with our technology vendors and some of our EP houses. And certainly they are developing rapidly in this space, but I would say that there's lots of room for growth within the broader industry, but the owner organizations in particular definitely need to mature in this space. Mike asked, what kind of effort is Suncor making to integrate AWP with its contractors? Will contractor requirements be required in the near future? Yeah, absolutely. As I said earlier, it's already showing up in most of our scopes of work, and in the near future, it will be a very clear-cut selection criteria to participate in our larger capital programs. There's simply no way for us to ensure its implementation without having our contractors at the table with us. Steve, have you been able to reduce risk costs per project due to better planning and execution? Absolutely, Steve. So you saw the KPI slide earlier. Risk and change oftentimes are synonymous. So change is simply a risk event that's actually been experienced. And so we use all the various KPIs, but change in particular to really monitor how a project is executing. And so really keeping a good governance team in place over the life cycle of the project really helps to reduce those risk costs. And really, AWP has a role there in that it's easier to provide transparency to where those risk areas are coming from. And so, if you take something like an AWP Master Index, and each package that you're going to be issuing on a project is mapped to another package, and it's also mapped to responsibilities on who's responsible to deliver it, you can really start to discern very quickly where the problem areas are in your project, and really hone in and really start to take some action on how to prevent those risks from propagating across the projects. I would say that's the real opportunity there for AWP.
We've got just a few minutes left.
Okay.
I think there's time for you to answer one more question, and there's 6 open questions. So do you want to take a look at those and see which one you want to address?
Well, I won't pick Mike's because I know Mike really well. Let's see, well-defined capital process. Do you use any other method of planning control like last planner? No, we do not. In case, okay, I'll say Suncor participate, EPC, earlier replies when implementing Suncor and developing integrated team. I'll actually use Mike's. It's an important aspect of AWP that I didn't get a chance to talk about. And it's how do you engage CNSU to ensure system boundaries are captured. So one of the things, and I didn't get a chance to highlight it here, is a principle of AWP for us is starting with the end in mind and working backwards. We call that backward pass planning. We really start with that systemization of the scope of work that then informs those AWP boundaries from there, Mike. And we're saying to projects now that system boundary formation aligned to the AWP boundary formation has to, at the very least, be started by Gate 2. And that's been a challenge, honestly, for us. I would say the current practice at Suncor is it gets started at the end of FEED and usually isn't really solid until well into construction execution. And of course, that is one of those sources of change that happens on a project, is the so-called bulk to system transition that happens during construction execution. We're of the mindset, and we advocate for that there should be no need to do any transition, that it should always have been planned. And so, we have in our AWP deliverables, the master index, content registers, and the data models, we've identified that the AWP to system alignment is a principal planning aspect. And so that we've got those planning rules in place on how to form those boundaries, so that you can't, for instance, have two contractors working simultaneously on one package, but more importantly, that you don't have system boundaries and package boundaries that are misaligned, and oftentimes that's where the challenges come from when we get into late stage execution, is we're trying to overlap commissioning and construction. It gets very difficult to do that efficiently. And so if you're planning for it, you can be more successful than if you're not planning for it. Let me put it that way.
Great. Well, I want to thank Dylan. I mean, I'm looking at the questions he was asked, and he got through 21 questions. So that's very impressive. Lots of engagement from you, the participants. So that's fantastic. I will just say that a number of the questions that came up related to things like data, how do you get stakeholders engaged, supply chain issues, commissioning, completion, and startup. And all of those happen to be topics that will be addressed in the virtual summit that CII is putting on. So if you want more information, that's a good place to go. But just want to say, great presentation, Dylan. Fantastic interaction from the audience, and we're closing off exactly on time. So thanks again for everybody. And this will be available for on demand. Steve will be sending that out for everybody who's registered. So look forward to any comments from you. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.